ask yourself, why would 4 or 5 commercial banks have the short positions, most of them naked in gold and silver, the way that they do, which creates distortions in reality and creates a narrative that, you know, gold and silver are just barbaric relics of the past when we know otherwise, and Bill and Chris know otherwise, and they have stood up not only to the counterintuitive nature, but to the naysayers and to the manipulation and all of the things that, I can understand why Bill gets the way he does or feels the way he does. But yeah, I think he's beginning to feel vindicated, and he's been right. How many people would have thought gold would hit $2,400 when he was writing and it was languishing at $400 and $500? And the same thing will be true about silver when it finally makes its move. And there's so many fundamentals that are growing by the day that you talk about all the time, and I try to talk about, that will make that happen. But the one thing that I've learned along the way, is that the fundamentals that we see, the logic, if you will, sometimes has an inverse correlation with outcome, at least in terms of when we think it will. But in the end, when you base your conclusions upon mathematics and economics with a sprinkling of old school logic upon it, typically these things pan out, and we're beginning to see some of that right now.
Did you know that 5 major commercial banks are holding massive short positions in gold and silver, mostly naked? This manipulation distorts reality, promoting the idea that precious metals are obsolete relics. However, Andy Schectman explains that the fundamentals tell a different story. Gold recently soared to $2,400, while silver surged from $18 to nearly $29. In the last 2 years, India imported a staggering 400 million ounces of silver, almost matching the amount drained from COMEX. Despite rising demand, ETFs have sold off $8 billion worth of assets, yet the rally continues. With supply deficits and significant military applications, silver is increasingly critical. Schectman believes silver could be the most undervalued asset of our generation, offering an extraordinary risk-reward potential. Could this be the investment opportunity of a lifetime?
I mean, look, it's really unusual that we see, first of all, India, right? 400 million ounces of silver they imported over the last 2 years, which ironically is pretty darn close to the amount. I'm not saying it's 1-to-1, but for me, there are the 400 million ounces almost drained off of COMEX. I'm not saying it's 1-to-1. In the last 2 years, that's about what India has imported, but their numbers in February alone are up 260% in imports. Last year, they imported 3,625 tons for the entire year. They're already up to 2,300 tons in just the first 2 months of the year. And so this is, again, being completely ignored by the mainstream. And when we talk about gold and silver, in particular, silver rising the way that it has, 10% up a week ago, and with great volatility, mind you, but continuing to surge higher, was, it was $18 not too long ago. It was $20 not too long ago, and here we are right now at almost 29. This has happened and Rob's a buddy of mine, and certainly I think when you have a shop like he does, where the public comes in, no one would have a better understanding of this, that the public has been selling into this rally. Maybe it is due to capitulation. Maybe it is due to the fact that people just need money with the cost of living going higher. I'm not quite sure. The disbelief that it will continue to rally, I am not sure. You look at the ETF participation, I don't know, 8 billion ounces or dollars rather, $8 billion worth have been sold out of the ETFs in this rally, and it continues to move higher. And, which is really interesting. And I mentioned that to my buddy, Bill Holter, and he says, well, to me, that's the ETFs. That's the share redemption. They're coming in and taking the physical possession. A lot of it is of share redemption that is not as easily noticed as if it were delivered off of COMEX. And he may be right, that has a portion of it, but the moral of the story is that in the face of rising real rates, if we believe the CPI, right, where you're getting 5.5% on a 6-month treasury, in the face of a very strong dollar, in the face of these things, as the public is really, if you look at the Gold Eagle sales, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount compared to where it's been. And I mentioned gold. To me, gold and silver are the same thing in terms of demand. But if you look at the ETFs that have really been bled down as people have been focused more on Nvidia and Bitcoin and things that, making them lots and lots of money, this rally has gone completely unnoticed by the West. In fact, selling into this rally, and yet it continues to move higher. I find it to be amazing. And then when you realize that the current president in Mexico, who appears to be on the way out, has an initiative in place to change the Constitution. I mean, they're the largest producer of silver in the world, maybe only second to Peru, to completely ban and change the Constitution to ban open pit mining. And the successor, a woman who's ahead in the polls, who looks like she'll win, she's all for that ban. So you're talking about taking tremendous amount of silver offline in an environment where we've experienced a structural deficit in supply demand over the last 2 years. And countries like India understanding, and it's very much similar to this growing group of industry insiders and analysts that are petitioning the Canadian government to change silver from an industrial metal to a critical metal, to one that is needed in so many things, not just in green and digital applications, but in just about everything, including military. And I find it also very interesting. And this is something that I don't think gets enough attention, is the military application. Now, I gave a speech at Jay Martin's conference in Vancouver, the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, and I think everyone should check that out. It's a great conference. He does it every year up in Vancouver. But I did 2 years ago, and I mentioned that I always believed there was 500 ounces of silver in a Tomahawk cruise missile. And if you Google it, it will pop up. And I met a gentleman there. In fact, he gave me this cup. He works for the Department of Defense, and he said that he had actually worked on the Patriot missile program while he was up there this year. I gave a different speech this year, but he came up to me in the audience and he said, the things I'm going to tell you are declassified, so don't worry. But I worked on the Patriot missile program, and I got to tell you, you're right. There is nearly 500 ounces of silver in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. And so I find it interesting that the Silver Institute, who I always thought put out really accurate or good information anyway, they omit this. There is no designation for military or aerospace. And when you look at the amount of wars that are being fought, when you look at the amount of munitions that are being made and sold to other countries, whether or not we're using them or not, it becomes very compelling and interesting to wonder, why would a handful of banks be short the level that they are, naked short, to such a degree, maybe the largest concentrated short position on any commodity ever traded on COMEX, why on silver? And maybe when you take a step back and realize there's a very fine line between conspiracy and reality, maybe indeed it has to do with the never-ending wars that the military-industrial complex seems to be waging and or funding. And ask yourself, does it make sense, or is it as dumb as a mud wall to be naked short in a commodity like silver in a monetary environment we have right now in countries like India, buying everything that's not nailed down? And the last thing, and I'll get your comment, is there's rumors all over the internet right now, and people that I talk to who have relationships in China, that the Chinese government is now urging their populace to focus more on silver than on gold, to accumulate silver. As Alistair McLeod would say, they have 38,000 metric tons of gold, 18,000 owned by the people and 20 by the state. Now they're saying, look, silver is the place to be, not only from a value standpoint, but maybe it's the Achilles heel of the West. So, I don't know, but I guess I would simply say that to me, silver is the most undervalued, underappreciated asset, and maybe the asset value of a generation. And I don't say that lightly. I don't know if I've ever seen anything that has better supply demand fundamentals and asymmetrical risk reward portfolio or asymmetrical risk reward, what am I trying to say again? Asymmetrical risk reward background. I mean, you look at it, the downside is virtually nothing. The upside is extraordinary. And a lot of that has to do with the suppression and the manipulation, which has created all of these distortions.
Thanks for watching. Let's recap the key points from today's discussion. Andy Schectman highlighted the massive short positions that 5 major commercial banks hold in gold and silver, mostly naked, and how this manipulation distorts the market. We learned that gold recently hit $2,400 and silver has surged from $18 to nearly $29. India imported an impressive 400 million ounces of silver over the past 2 years, aligning closely with the amount drained from COMEX. Despite ETFs selling off $8 billion worth of assets, the rally continues, driven by rising demand and significant military applications. Schectman believes silver could be the most undervalued asset of our generation, offering an extraordinary risk-reward potential. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more insightful content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop your opinions in the comments section below.